Alright, so we're back here working on Tim, and we're going to get the motor in here today. Did kind of mock this thing up last night, just kind of front to back where I want it. I can't get it low enough because of the K-member right now. We did open up some room back here because it was actually rubbing on the firewall over there. Went over this in the last video, but that section there is all rounded off because it was actually rubbing on the firewall down there. So the plan for this now is to notch out this K-member section here and box it back in with some steel plate. Some of you guys had some concerns about not doing a tubular K-member, which is really weird because it's not your car. Yeah, we're getting a lot of work done to this car, but we're doing it on a really tight budget. So by the time you do the tubular K-member, then you might as well do the control arms. And then at that point, you're at almost half of the total budget for this whole project. So what I'm going to do is notch it out, box it in, drop the engine down, and we'll call it good. This is going to be mostly a street-driven car. There's guys going really fast with stock K-members, so I don't really feel like it's necessary to do it. It's not going to be holding him back at all. At this point, it's just going to be adding costs where we don't need to add costs. So I'm going to get this thing back out. We'll start cutting. I did mark it with a silver Sharpie. Let's do that. Okay, so I think this is going to be the final resting position here. I'm pretty happy with this and where it's at. I have more than enough room now with the K-member clearancing and plenty of room above the steering rack. The engine at this angle right now is at 3.5 degrees. And if I measure from the center line of the engine to the fender here, we're at about 26.5 degrees, like 26 3/8, or inches, 26 3/8 inches. And then we're at 25 here. So we're almost at right at 1.5 inches to the passenger side, which lines up with the pinion in the rear end. So measuring the pinion to the frame rail, the pinion is 1.5 inches farther over to the passenger side on the rear end. So I'm going to kick the engine over 1.5 to match the pinion to keep the driveline angle as straight as possible. We have a 3.5 degree angle downward now. That does leave me room to put spacers in at the transmission if I need to angle it down. And when the full weight of the engine is on the vehicle and you get everything up in the front, it'll tip it down a little bit. So the idea is I want to try to get it closer to 3 degrees with the full weight on it at the end. But we will have some adjustability with spacers at the transmission. The rear pinion right now is at 1 degree facing up. So that means that the engine and the pinion are within 2 degrees of each other right now. So that's good. And then I know that the working angle of each U-joint is going to be inside of 3 degrees of each other. So the transmission to the first U-joint angle will be less than 3 degrees, and then the drive shaft to the pinion will be less than 3 degrees. The pinion and the engine are within 3 degrees. So I like how that's looking now. I think what I'm going to do is start to mock up the engine mounts and then maybe just tack them into place, and then I'll probably pull all this back out and then box the other section in. Alright, well I got the mounts bolted up to the engine, and this side will actually be pretty easy to just go on this way. And I'll just have to cut a little bit off of this one to get it to line up with the bolt hole. And I got a nice flat area to weld these two on this side. The problem, however, is on the driver's side. It's not going to be as easy. So the factory K-member engine mount section was cut out on this one because it was motor plated. You can see this section here where it's all cut out. So this one isn't going to be as simple. I might be able to notch out some for the power steering, but then the backside here is too much to just notch out the bracket. So I'm going to have to do something a little bit different. So I might end up using just some plain flat stock and then completely build something that comes up a little bit higher and then maybe have a support from the bottom. Or my other thought was to have a flat piece of flat stock, weld back in where the factory mount was from this section to the bottom section, because there's still a lip where it was cut off. So I would be able to go, so I might go straight across with a thinner piece of flat stock and then weld in some vertical pieces like this, so it has a little bit of support on the bottom on that side, and then I can go in at a higher angle like this to still clear steering section. So I'll have to get a little creative on that part. I think what I'll do is start on the passenger side first, and then I'll worry about this one. Okay, so I decided to do this side first, actually, because it's going to be, I figured it'd be more difficult than the other side, so might as well get that out of the way. Bent that piece, and then while I was making the driver's side piece, I mocked it up over here just to see how it would look, and it actually fit pretty nice. So I made another piece for the passenger side. Then what I'll probably do is I'll use those tabs to go off of that section, and then I can just weld that in, and it should be pretty simple. So I like that idea. It kind of matches on both sides instead of having this side look different than the other side. And now I'll just be able to come off this bottom section to a tab there. Still have clearance all the way around on the steering box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the tabs, get them tacked in place with the bolt, and then I will take it out, fully weld the tabs, and then I'll put it back in, and then I'll be able to fully weld that bracket in. Okay, so I got the tabs tacked in there now. I'm going to have to do a little bit of clearancing on the back side for the steering shaft. But here's what the passenger side looks like. So now I'll be able to lift the engine up, take the bolts out, drop those down and fully weld them. And then what I'll do is bolt them back on, drop the engine down into place, make sure it's level, and then I'll tack the main brackets in place, pull the engine back out, and fully weld those. Okay, got everything tacked into its final resting place here. 0.0 degrees on the angle. That's pretty good. That's what the passenger side mount looks like. That's all tacked into place, 4 spots. Driver's side is all tacked into place. That weld back there is not a booger. That is weld I purposely built up there because I had to clearance out the back section for the steering shaft. If you look at the steering shaft there, see how it rotates right into that section. So that's actually notched and clearanced out. And then I just built up the inside of that joint right there and then took some material down from the back side. So it's still strong, it's still thick enough, but it is clearance enough to clear the shaft. It was rubbing slightly on there before, but now it's nice and clear. So yeah, this side was a little bit awkward. It would have been a lot easier if the factory K-member section wasn't cut out of there, but basically had to rebuild that. So that's kind of what this little loop-de-doo was. So I just took that flat plate and put it on the press and pressed it to the bend that I needed and put it in there. So I'll probably end up cutting these tabs off. I'm going to leave them there for now before I cut them off because there might be something else that I could use them for. I'm not sure yet, but I'll keep them there until I need to cut them off. But other than that, that's what it looks like with just a couple tack welds holding the motor in right now. So what I'll do next is pull the motor out, fully weld everything, and then I will box in that K-member. Okay, well there you have it. Mounts all in and painted. I did box in this whole section here, paint that. So I just kind of boxed that in with some plate and then took the flap wheel around all the welds, except for those inside seams. But it turned out okay for just whipping that together. Doesn't look too bad. We got a lot of clearance now around the oil pan. And these, I just quick sprayed these with some black paint for now. And that should be good. And we'll go from there. Alrighty, so next video I should be able to get the motor in and start mocking up the hot side. Put the manifolds on and then I'll just kind of go off of that. Probably build like a little hanger to mock up the turbos. Figure out where we want them. And we'll keep making progress on this thing.